He is afraid. He is totally alone. He is 3 million light years from home.
Happy Halloween, everyone. I hope your spooky season was awesome and that you had a really great day. I am in my Halloween costume this year. I decided to go as a Pizza Planet delivery guy. And I got one more thing here to complete the costume. And that is, of course, the pizza that one of you, I'm sure, will be enjoying very soon as I come to your house. I want this to be a new tradition on my channel every single Halloween because for the past few Halloweens, for many years, I've been reviewing the Halloween franchise. Every single Halloween, I do an entry in the franchise, and last year I did H2O. I don't want to do Resurrection. I've already talked about that on my buddy the Flick Picks channel. I don't want to talk about the zombie movies either, and so I want to start a new tradition. That's every single Halloween I can review any movie I feel like that has some kind of Halloween thing in it or whatever, or it's a genre film, but I always have to wear my costume. Now, we'll talk about E.T., don't worry, we'll get there, but something really special happened this Halloween, and I have to share it with you guys. This was the first Halloween that my kids ever went trick-or-treating. The past few years, they've hung out at our house while kids came to our door and we gave them candy and they kind of just sat there looking like, what's going on? This year, they started to figure it out. We took them around the block and had such a great time, but this was also the first year I ever went trick-or-treating. Because I wasn't allowed to as a kid. We didn't celebrate. How many parents can say the first time they ever went trick-or-treating was the first time their kids went trick-or-treating? I'm going to cry now. I need a second. So long as I'm doing these Halloween videos every year, on Halloween, I'll review whatever I want, but I got to wear the costume. And I can't wait to share that with you guys because I do some funny costumes sometimes. E.T. is obviously an immensely popular film. It had a massive theatrical run. It set a record for how long it was in theaters. It made so much money, and adjusted for inflation, it is still a juggernaut. I saw it for the first time as a kid because I went to Toys R Us and my parents said I could buy a couple videos. And those videos ended up being The Incredible Hulk pilot, starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, Planet of the Dinosaurs, and E.T. All three of them were watched heavily to the point where the tracking started to wear out a little bit on the VHS and you'd see those dancing lines at the bottom of the screen, especially Planet of the Dinosaurs. Don't ask me why, I think that's the one I watched the most. And for the longest time, I thought that my VHS copy of E.T. had a defect because the outer edge was green. And then my friend ended up buying the movie on video a few years later, and his had the same green thing on it. There's tons of explanations for why. Some say it's to fight piracy, others say it's for fun, or maybe it's because E.T. the Green Planet book thing was like a moment, I don't know. Point being is, I think it might have just been something they did. They were like, let's just make that part of the VHS green. It'll be cool. Kids will be like, whoa, green. Little-known filmmaker Steven Spielberg directed E.T. John Williams composed the score and took home a Best Original Score Oscar. And to this day, Spielberg actually refers to E.T. as one of the very few films he's made that he can watch again. He doesn't like to talk too much about that. He's mentioned Raiders of the Lost Ark in the past. He was recently asked in an interview with Stephen Colbert about that, and E.T. was the one he chose to focus on. He actually said that if his kids get to a point where they're going to watch E.T., he feels like he has to be there to watch his kids watch it. So obviously this movie means a lot to him and it's very personal to him. And both him and John Williams have referenced this film as their favorite collaboration.
Is there a favorite score for Steven Spielberg that you've done?
Probably E.T.
And even though there are scores that Williams has done for Spielberg that I do prefer over E.T., it's hard to argue with them. The score does so much for the movie, similar to his work on Jaws. It's tough to imagine Jaws without John Williams, and when you look at kids flying through the sky on bicycles, obscuring the moon and later the sun, it's really hard to watch that and think, what would this be like with anything other than John Williams? Of course, E.T. is about an alien that's stranded on Earth and a little boy named Elliot who finds him. Elliot doesn't have any friends, and even his family members are kind of estranged from him because his mother is going through a separation, his older brother is, well, his older brother, and his little sister is his little sister, so they don't really get along very well. But when Elliot and E.T. develop an emotional connection, not just as friends, but very literally a connection in which they feel what the other person feels, Elliot begins to realize that E.T. has got to get home, or he might die. Everything that could ever be said about E.T. has been said. I'm not going to say anything new. Whenever I do these videos, I always try to find a personal way of expressing my experience with the movie. And I told you about how I saw it for the first time. But over the years, there have been little moments that have always meant something to me. Even small moments, like when Elliot calls his brother this.
There's nothing like that, penis breath!
Elliot! Sit down.
I've always loved how his mother tries to scold him, but she can't help but laugh a little bit because she realizes it's kind of funny. And that is such a parental thing. When you see your kid do something and you're like, I know I don't want you to do that, but god damn, that is really funny. The other day, my kid took a spaghetti noodle and coiled it on his head. I was like, dude, stop. But also, that's really funny. Nowadays, you might hear someone say in regards to a movie or a television show that it has that Amblin feel. They're talking about E.T. Amblin's made a ton of movies, but they're talking about E.T. Stranger Things would not exist without E.T., like at all. It's funny because even though this movie is so influential, it does feel like over the years, it's not getting new fans. I know that's not entirely true, and I'm sure there are plenty of young people who like this movie. But I say this because when I was still a Jehovah's Witness, I took a ton of people I knew to see this movie when it was re-released in theaters. And it was a lot of fun to see it on the big screen. Unfortunately, I think it was the special edition version with all the E.T. eyeball special effects, and when Spielberg removed the guns and replaced them with walkie-talkies, which he has admitted was a really bad idea. It was me and some of my friends at the time who were of the same age, but then there were like some teenagers who went with us, and they thought it was so boring until the last 20 minutes. They were completely bored by it. They thought it was really cheesy. They thought E.T. looked stupid, and they didn't like it at all. And I've seen people talk about this movie over the years in that way, that it's overrated or that John Williams is really the person you should be thanking for all of the tears we cry when we watch the movie. And I do have to say, I kind of agree with that part. But for me, I don't think that E.T. is a case of you had to be there. I wasn't even alive in 1982. This movie has always felt special to me because I think it really does speak to the loners and the outcasts, people who don't have a lot of friends. Maybe they're heavily bullied and they're looking to reach out and feel some kind of connection. And if you don't have that in your life, or you've never experienced that kind of loneliness, this movie might not speak to you as much as others. I'm not saying you have to be lonely to appreciate E.T., but I do think that it helps. I think that if you've ever gone through that kind of feeling, especially when you're little, this movie will mean more to you. Henry Thomas is a fantastic actor still. He is so good now. I've seen him in so many things. I just recently finished The Fall of the House of Usher, and he was wonderful in that. And the show is amazing, by the way. You guys gotta watch it if you haven't. But this is one of the best child performances I've ever seen. His audition is also mind-blowing. To have Spielberg in the room being like, you got the job, kid, on the audition tape, that's pretty impressive. Little Drew Barrymore is also charming as hell in the movie, as is Robert MacNaughton as Michael. I love the scene where he comes back from school and he's still wearing his football uniform and he's kind of singing to himself, looking through the fridge. I would be lying if I said I've never been like, nothing but hell shit, when opening a fridge. And of course, the design of E.T. and the puppetry of him, as well as the performance of the actors who inhabited the body, it really works still. It is similar to Yoda, one of those things where it's like, if this doesn't work, our movie is absolutely screwed. But it really did. But there's a performance in the movie that I think doesn't get enough credit. I rarely hear people talking about it, and that's Dee Wallace as the mother. She is magnificent here. She has to strike a balance between a parent who is feeling a lot of hurt over a separation and probably being cheated on, and also being a single mother, essentially, and worrying about her children, wanting to be there for her kids and their friends while they all have fun and play Dungeons and Dragons, but also standing over by the sink and crying when she realizes that the man she loves is probably not coming back. But I made a video recently where I talked about how certain movies changed for me after becoming a parent, and my emotional reactions to certain things were different. And this movie has one, and I discovered it when I rewatched it, and it's near the end when Elliot, I guess, spoilers, Jesus, if you've never seen E.T., I mean, go watch it. some people haven't seen it, I guess. So, I shouldn't judge. At the end, when Elliot hugs E.T., saying goodbye, and she falls to her knees, she has this look on her face that seems to say, I had no idea that my son was going through whatever he's going through, and I can't believe I missed it. Rewatching the movie, I was reminded that there was a time when a Universal film could just have Star Wars figures in the movie, because Steven Spielberg knew George Lucas and they're friends and they've made movies together, and he was probably like, can we just have Boba Fett and Lando Calrissian in the movie? George Lucas was like, yes. And years later, Lucas would put a bunch of ETs in The Phantom Menace. And of course, one of the biggest reasons that this movie is even part of the Halloween special this year is because it actually does take place during Halloween. Sometimes that's forgotten about this movie. There's a whole Halloween sequence where they go trick-or-treating, and E.T. sees a guy dressed up as Yoda and thinks he's gonna go home now. And John Williams, being that sly composer that he is, put a little bit of the Yoda theme right then. The film also has one of my favorite cut-tos ever that is drastically aided by John Williams, of course. And it's a scene that every time John Williams performs live with a visual, the audience almost always goes insane. There are, of course, better transitions in cinema, and not always so aided by music, but Jesus, come on. That is so enthralling. To cut so fast and so loud to this chase scene to really get your blood pumping, and it's so exciting. The second to last song on the official soundtrack is pretty much the last 20 minutes of this movie, before the end credits. Everything John Williams does here, it feels inhuman. I can't imagine a guy creating that. It's so perfect. And also what's kind of gone down in legend is that while he was conducting this for the movie, looking at a screen that showed the movie with his orchestra, they just couldn't get it right because it's so much music that has to be timed perfectly to all of these important emotional moments. And apparently Spielberg came in and said, you know what, let's shut off the screen. John, just do it how you would do it. Don't worry about my movie. And that's what happened. And Spielberg then recut that to fit John Williams and his orchestra and their performance. Now, this is, of course, very unorthodox, but it clearly worked. What people don't necessarily realize is what that means. Nowadays, when you can edit everything on a computer, that's a whole process to unlock your movie. You've already reached picture lock. People are working on the sound. Your film is in a place where you don't want to touch it anymore because every movement you make now adds more work for other people. Back then, you're cutting on film. That's even more work to say, you know what, we're going to unlock the movie. We're going to at least maybe unlock this reel of the movie, meaning that you're only unlocking a portion of it. Of course, I could be talking out of my ass, but more than likely, they unlocked a reel of E.T., just near the end, probably the last reel, and said, we're going to mess around with this because John's going to do this music and it's going to be amazing, so just deal with it. And it paid off because not only is it one of the most emotionally stirring musical compositions ever, but John Williams walked home with an Oscar. It's not discussed amongst some of Spielberg's classics anymore. You hear about Jaws and Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan and Raiders of the Lost Ark. You don't hear people mentioning E.T. amongst them. Do I think that every movie I just said is better than E.T.? Yes. So I'm kind of a hypocrite. But I also think that E.T. is just one of those movies that is so popular and so influential that people are almost afraid to talk about it like it's cinema. And that's one of my least favorite things about film criticism and film discussion, film analysis, period, is when a movie becomes very popular, people go like, oh, now everybody likes it. It's not cool to talk about it anymore. This film is masterfully directed. The idea that the whole movie is almost entirely filmed from the perspective of a child, like literally their level, their eye level. Barely seeing a single adult in a close-up for the entire movie, except for his mother, because that's the only adult that he's close to. And in that amazing scene when E.T. lifts all the kids' bikes, these adults who see this life-changing thing don't even get a close-up. And this guy who's out in front of them only gets a two-shot with Michael because Michael's in the shot. Peter Coyote as Keys, a guy who we think is like this government agent who wants to kill E.T. for the entire film. We only see his keys for the whole movie until he meets Elliot, and he comes into Elliot's world and becomes important to Elliot, and now we're allowed to see him. There's even a deleted scene with Harrison fucking Ford, who at the time was married to Melissa Matheson, who wrote the film. He played Elliot's principal. I imagine this scene happened in some way after the frog incident that's depicted in the movie. And Spielberg didn't even show Harrison Ford's face. That's a real dedication to your craft when you've got someone like that in your movie and you're choosing to not even show their face. And in the final scene, as Gertie says goodbye to E.T. and then Michael says goodbye, it's entirely kept in a master. We only get a close-up of E.T. when Elliot says goodbye to him. There's choices here that no one talks about. So yeah, that's me talking about E.T. And guys, I love this movie, and if you've never seen it, I hope you check it out. It's just a really emotionally stirring movie, and it's very difficult to watch it without feeling something, especially near the end, thanks to John Williams. Happy Halloween, everyone. I hope you had just a wonderful spooky season. I did. It was great to see my kids trick-or-treat, for me to go trick-or-treating for the first time. I just had so much fun talking with you guys about so many movies. As usual, I went a little overboard and talked about like every movie. Next year, I'm going to do probably the same thing. There's going to be a link for a playlist in a second. If you missed any of those videos, I do hope you check them out. It's always a little emotional for me saying goodbye to the Halloween special every year, but I had a great time making these videos, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching them. Thank you so much, as always, for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.